Hi everybody, welcome to the Top 2 Inches of Sport podcast with me, Anthony Sheriff. This is a podcast about something that's always fascinated me, the mindset required to succeed in elite level sport. On this podcast, I'm going to talk to people who I really look up to in the world of sport and try to find out how they deal with the highs and lows that come with consistently striving for success in the unforgiving environment of elite sport. For this week's podcast, I spoke to former UFC fighter Joe Duffy. Joe had a very successful MMA career and competed in some huge, high-profile fights, which included a famous victory over Conor McGregor, and he also dabbled in the boxing game, going 7-0 as a professional boxer. Joe talks about the mentality needed to be a successful mixed martial artist and discusses the mental challenges of competing at the very, very top level of the fight game. I've wanted to have a mixed martial artist on the podcast for a while now because it's a sport that requires a mental strength that's almost incomparable really to any other sports. I enjoyed chatting to Joe for this one, so here's this week's episode of the Top 2 Inches of Sport with Joe Duffy. Right, good to go. Thanks a million, Joe, for coming on to the podcast today, all the way from Canada. So is that your new permanent residence, or do you have any plans to kind of go back to Donegal anytime soon?
No, this is it now. This is it. So I have the paperwork in and everything. So this is going to be my base to stay now.
Yeah, happy days. Look, you're the first MMA fighter I've had on the podcast, and I've wanted to have one on for a long time, to be honest, because I know some people don't particularly love MMA. I'm a fan myself, but even people that don't like it, they can't deny like the mental strength it takes for man or woman to get into a cage in just like little 4-ounce gloves and have complete unarmed combat. So I think the mental strength it takes is unbelievable. Now, when you look at the top level, you know, the UFC, Bellator, things like that, whenever I look at those athletes, I always assume those people must have been doing that from a very, very young age. So at what age did you get into combat sports, and like what was the initial discipline you got into?
I said that I started very young. I was 5 when I took my first class. It was Taekwondo I started with. And to be honest, that was it. I was with the same club until, I don't even know what age I was when I left Wales. I don't know. It was my last fight on Cage Warriors before I went to boxing. Yeah. So that was maybe 2011 or 2012.
Yeah.
So that was it. Like I never stopped. You know, I was with that club the whole time and I was training the whole time. So yeah. Fighting was just normality to me, I suppose. Like.
Yeah. And even when you were young, like, were you an aggressive kind of a young lad who just wanted to have a tear up, or did you just fall in love with the competition and the skill side of it?
I was the complete opposite, to be honest. I was very timid, you know. Like I came from like a family, like I was the youngest in the family, so I was kind of babied, if anything, you know. So I was very shy, very timid, and it was just a karate kid more than anything. I was always into it all, you know. I was watching it, and then once I started, I just never stopped. Like I was just I just kind of fell in love with it, and that was it. Like.
Yeah, I'm not that surprised to hear that, because any fighter that I've spoken in the past, or any fighters that I know, they're the complete opposite of what I think the kind of general like opinion is. Some people have this stereotypical view of a fighter that they're this kind of barbarian, they just want to go and bash everybody up, where it seems to be the complete opposite for any fighter I've spoken to. There seems to be a real sort of a calmness almost about them, they're quite placid people. So is that actually, even if we're talking from a mental point of view, is calmness a very important part of fighting? Because I listened to a really interesting interview once with George St. Pierre, probably the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. And it was with him and a mental coach that he worked with. And what they were talking about, they said that what separates the greatest fighters from the rest of the chasing pack basically is their ability to focus on what is rather than focusing on what ifs. So basically you've got all this anxiety going on in the fight, all this, you know, tension, fear as well, danger, but they're able to just focus on just what is in front of them. So almost just have this complete calmness about them. So like, would you agree with that calmness is actually a very underrated mental part of being a successful fighter?
I think so. I think especially once you're in there, you know, like once you're fighting, you got to be calm. Otherwise, everything kind of goes out the window a little bit. You know, once you're too fired up or you got too much emotions, I find it as a negative effect. You know, I find if anything is I suppose, like you just said, with George, like everything kind of goes to the side and you're just thinking about the task at hand and you're kind of reading the situation as it's happening, rather than thinking of your emotions whatsoever. I find emotions shouldn't really come into it much.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that something that only comes with experience, really, of actually being in there? Like, I mean, does every fighter, like, did you yourself go through these kind of almost panics in a cage at some stage?
At some stage, without a doubt, even like as a kid, like you don't know no different. So it was easy as a kid, you just trust your coaches and you go and you fight. You don't give it much thought. Obviously, you had the nerves, but they were always kind of like a good thing, the nerves, I found. But at some stage, I definitely find you go through it. I remember I went like a lot of years where I didn't lose in any sort of competition. Like I was competing in all sorts of stuff, and if anything, it became a bit of a monkey on my back. Like there
Yeah.
was this expectation behind me, and the pressure I kind of put on myself not to lose. And then I remember my pro debut. I remember just the night before not wanting to even go to sleep because I knew when I woke up I had to fight.
Yeah.
So I think at some point I remember I remember even being in the cage that night. I remember the nerves. I remember cage rage was a big thing at the time, and Dave O'Donnell was at the table right next to where I was in my corner. So I remember looking at him thinking, geez, like he could be scouting all this. So and that was just as the fight was about to start. So it's funny, but then you go through so many different phases. I remember I wasn't quite comfortable on my feet yet. I hadn't found my distance in the striking or my confidence in the striking, which is strange because like I've been striking my whole life.
Yeah.
But I remember in one of the Cage Warriors fights, then it just kind of it came, and that was it. Then like I found I'd never been calmer in the cage then.
Mm.
Um, and and it's funny, like when I went to boxing, because it was all hard sparring. It was just the same as a fight.
Mm.
Again, like in every situation, I found I was very calm. Like
Yeah.
even like fight day, it didn't really phase me much.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've been at both. I've been in the change room where you're terrified, and I've been in the change room where you haven't got a care in the world.
Yeah. Look, we'll talk about different moments throughout your career, but you did mention your debut there. Can you just give us a bit of a idea? What age were you when you turned pro? So what age would you have been making your debut?
I think I was either 20 or just turned 21. I think it was.
Yeah.
Um, I was fighting at welterweight for my pro debut, and I remember like I didn't know much about cutting weight. But I remember I never forget the weigh-in. Me and a rake of the lads, they flew over from home for the fight. We all drove up to Kidderminster. That's where the weigh-in was. And I remember weighing in on the scales, like I didn't have to cut no weight because like my weight was just there.
Yeah.
Then I remember a guy walking in, and I was like, I was talking away to the promoter saying, "Oh, the weight's fine. I didn't have to cut nothing." And then this guy came in, and I was talking away freely because I thought this guy was way too big to be in my weight class. And
Yeah.
then it was actually the guy I was fighting. I was Jesus. I remember leaving there. I was terrified. Then the whole drive back, I was like, oh, Christ, this guy is massive.
Yeah.
So I remember that being a factor. Just the size advantage. Because he had, I think this would have been his 10th pro fight, so he had a good bit more experience in that sense.
Mm.
Um, but then on fight night again, like I said, because this is all I ever done, it was kind of once the fight started, it was just the training taking over.
Yeah. But there's so much training obviously has to go into mixed martial arts because you've got all the different disciplines like your boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, whatever it may be. Like at this stage, I'm like, maybe you'll correct me, maybe I'm wrong, but you're with Cage Rage. I'm sure that's probably not paying enough for you to like live. So are you studying and working as well, or are you actually just full time at the MMA at this stage?
So yeah, that was that. More than anything, like I was in a good position. Like I would work for my father. He had a construction company, so I'd work with him, and then I would train, and then like it was contracts more than anything. So it might be like a long spell without work then or whatever. So it wasn't easy. There was a lot of tough times. There was times where I was just signed on the dole. I couldn't pay the bills and everything, so I just had to sign on, and at the same time I was helping in the club. I was coaching a lot in the club. Like I wasn't getting paid for that, but it was kind of, you learn so much from teaching too. So you kind of had to put that to the side, the little struggles, and just focus on the goal, the main goal, which was to reach the top. And it was a good struggle at the start, but then I was lucky enough to be supported by my parents. Instead of them saying, come on, you need to get a job or whatever, they were like, they trusted 100% in my ability, and they just kind of stuck with me through it all.
Yeah. What was your belief when you were turning professional? Like, were you thinking, I'm definitely going to make it to like the UFC, or were you kind of just going, I'll give it a go, see how far I go, or like, what was your mindset turning over?
I knew when I was a teenager. I think I was maybe 13. I was in school when people had asked me what I was going to do. I said I wanted to fight it. It was Pride at the time. Pride was the
Yeah,
main one. So that's what it was for me. I was like, when I was 13, and I 100% had that belief.
yeah,
Like I'd watch the Ultimate Fighters. I believed I was better than all them guys. I had this, like, no doubt in my mind. I knew I was going to make it to the top.
yeah. So throughout your career, I'd like to know how much emphasis would you have put on the mental side of the game? I remember there's a great UFC, I think it was middleweight champion, Rich Franklin. He came out with an interesting quote. He said that training for a fight is 90% physical and 10% mental. But then he said on fight night, that totally flips. When you get in the cage, he said it's 90% mental and 10% physical. Like, the bright lights, the crowd, and everyone there. Like, would you agree with that? And like, how much emphasis did you put on the mental side of the game throughout your career?
Um, do you know what? Like, I think because I fought from a young age, I was kind of privileged in that sense. I didn't have to give it too much too
Yeah,
much work. There was always um uphill battles, amongst it all. So there's certain points in my career where it was much harder than others, or I had to overcome stuff. Like, I remember coming back from losing on the Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter itself was a big one. Like, I got there. Um, I was only training in a small club. There wasn't even another pro, and I was surrounded by these guys who was coming from these big clubs who knew their weight cutting inside out. Like, they felt like they deserved their spot there. Where for me, it was almost like a privilege to be there.
yeah,
Um, like, losing on that, like, and I know on fight night I didn't go in and I didn't give my all. So that was a big turning point for me. For me, it was like, I never wanted to have that feeling again of regret, holding back. So for me, that was a big turning point um, in my career. And I remember before every fight, still having that word, no regrets. Before I left the change room, no regrets. Leave it all in the octagon. So that was definitely one of the big turning points. But I suppose to a degree it's right. If you're confident in your training, then once you step in fight night, there's no more you can do.
yeah.
Like it's no point breaking your head over it now. Like, it's too late. You got to do all the work, and if you trust in the work you done, then on fight night, you go out and you do everything you can. Then there's nothing more you can do.
Absolutely, yeah. I just want to ask you about what you said there about in the Ultimate Fighter, you felt like you didn't give it 100%. Do you mean like in the preparation for it, or when you got into the cage, you feel like you didn't let the shots go, or what do you mean by that?
Exactly that. Once I got into the cage, I choked in a sense. Like,
Mm,
I got in there. I didn't, like I said, I didn't trust my striking at the time. I held back. I remember, like, I pulled guard because at the time I felt like I could triangle everyone. So, like, I went for the easy option. I went for the easy option. I thought, right, I'm not comfortable. Let's get comfortable in the cage. I pulled guard. I thought, I'll triangle him. That'll be it. Like, I was looking to get the fight over. Like, that's when people aren't comfortable in there, when they're doing things just desperate, things just kind of trying to make the fight finish too quick. That's a major sign that they're not comfortable in there on fight night. And I had that at the time. And like, I never wanted that feeling again. Of, like, especially for me, it was such a big like it was a big thing, you know. You think it's the end of the world. You think you're never going to get your opportunity again. Getting into UFC at the time wasn't a gimme, you know. Like there wasn't many guys from Ireland. Well, nobody from Ireland or the UK in there. So it was a big thing, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously, just on that day, like I said, I felt like I was out of my depth a little bit, and I tried to take the easy option, and I was against a grappler, you know. I didn't know what I was up against. I didn't know whether he was a striker or a grappler. I didn't know nothing about him, so I took the easy option when, you know, the right option would have been to strike with this guy, you know.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that was obviously, a disappointing moment in your career. Like, at any stage throughout your career, did you work with a sports psychologist, or were you at any stage even tempted to work with one, or approached by one, or anything like that?
No, never. I didn't actually. I was fortunate enough that I had a coach who coached me from a kid, you know,
Yeah.
like my coach Heath Gate. He was kind of like a father figure to me, you know. I spent every day with him pretty much for, you know, near 20 years. So like after the fight, I went back, you know, and he just knew how to talk to me, you know. He knew how to bring my confidence out. And maybe on fight night, maybe that's what was lacking, you know. Like somebody I had in my corner from day one, and he wasn't there for the fight. But again, he talked me around, you know, got me back in the gym straight away. And I found another turning point was, so in the same time where I was doubting myself, there was like a martial arts games going on in Las Vegas, and so it would have been a coach, or my coach, Ross Inacaro. He kind of taught us the jujitsu aspect of the game.
Yeah.
And Ross wanted me to go out to Vegas to help the team, you know, compete and help the team. So Ross helped me come out to Vegas, and again, there was another turning point because I was competing against guys from the States, from Canada, and just by getting back in there competing, and I pretty much won all my matches. I think I drew one. Like it gave me the confidence again to say, no, I deserve to be here, you know. Like
Yeah.
at some point there was no weight classes because there wasn't enough competitors in some of the sports, so
Yeah.
I was competing against guys much heavier, and I was just going in and fighting well. So
Yeah.
again, that was a big turning point, which kind of led on to the me signing with Cage Warriors.
Yeah.
So with Cage Warriors, my thought process behind it was, we're fighting on fighting on the Ultimate Fighter, the bright lights, the big show, all this thing. I thought I wasn't prepared for that, so I thought, right, if I'm going to make the top, then the only way to do it is fight on the big show that kind of gets you comfortable with all this.
Yeah.
And then that's when I had my first fight with Cage Warriors.
Yeah. Well, like, again, you were talking about the Ultimate Fighter loss you had there. So I'm always interested in losses in MMA if you compare them to boxing. Normally in boxing, if somebody loses a couple of fights, they're almost dismissed as being useless, which obviously isn't true at all. But in MMA, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, fighters kind of grow from it, learn from it, come back. Yourself being a massive example of that when you lost that Ultimate Fighter, because I was reading up about you, and you sort of, did you reevaluate kind of your whole camp, your whole way of living? You seem to have reevaluated quite a bit after that fight in the Ultimate Fighter. So, like, can losses actually be a massive positive so long as you're willing to analyze exactly why you lost?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. I think every fight, you know, like whether you win or lose, you can learn from it. And like when I went on the run on Cage Warriors, every fight I was kind of looking at the footage that people had available, and I was thinking, okay, if I was to fight me, how would I how would I train to beat him? What would be my game plan to beat him?
Yeah.
So then, obviously, my training camp then was, okay, this is what he's thinking. So now I'm gonna train to kill his game plan, you know.
Yeah.
And even after that, like I remember my first fight then on Cage Warriors. Like I had the worst camp ever. I popped my shoulder in camp, so I could barely throw my jab. And obviously that's when I later down the line got the surgery. I remember having the flu, so I maybe had 2 weeks of actual training.
Mm.
And I remember it was just before I left for the flight. I remember the coach who was cornering me, Simon. Simon was in my corner. He was kind of my main training partner throughout the years. And I was very negative because obviously it's my first fight back. Like I came off a loss and I had the worst camp. And he was like, I said to him, like I was in such a negative mood, you know, and he was saying to me, he said, "Are you going to fight?" I said, "Yeah." And his words was, he kind of told me off. He's like, "Well, you better be fucking positive about it. like, like there's nothing you can do now. So if you're going to fight, you got to be positive about it."
Yeah.
And again, it was like a mind changing moment, you know. Like when he said, I was like, yeah, he's 100% right. I'm going to fight anyway. I'm not going to pull out of the fight, so I may as well be positive and trust my ability. And it was the best thing he could have done to me, because on fight night again, like anytime them nerves crept into my head or them doubts, it was like, no, I'm fighting anyway, so I've got to be positive about it.
Yeah, so a lot of your confidence, just listening to you speak, clearly comes from just the experience. You've massive experience. You're competing since you're 5, 6 years old, and obviously also talking to coaches and training partners as well. So I know some athletes will use sports psychologists. Just from your experience in MMA, I know Rich Franklin has, I know George St. Pierre has. Just from your experience, are they commonplace in MMA, or is it one of them where it's such a macho sport? I mean, it couldn't possibly be any more of a macho sport. So would it be almost frowned upon in a way?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think as an athlete, you know, whatever helps. You know, some people are be more more inclined to go that direction. Some people's got a coach that they 100% got a belief in.
Yeah.
Or like I said, like training partners who's been around from day one, who will, you know, tell you the truth. And when you trust what they say, then you know, it's wherever you get your confidence from, you know, like whether it be as a sports psychologist or whether it's a coach that you got there, then I suppose it's whatever works for the individual.
Absolutely, yeah. So I want to talk to you about the actual process of like fight day now and fight night. But I want to actually start the day before a fight, because obviously one of the most interesting things we see nowadays is the big weigh-ins. So where it's kind of where you come face to face with your opponent, stripped down, making weight. A lot of people put an awful lot of emphasis onto, like, you know, the psychological battle of a weigh-in, whereas other people dismiss that totally and just say it's a load of nonsense. Like, once the cage door closes, they're going to fight anyway, so there's no real psychological gains can be got there. What side of the argument do you fall? Do you think you can gain a psychological edge and also lose a psychological edge, or do you see the weigh-ins as just a bit of bravado?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think there are times, like there's times when you're weighing in, like you do see through them, like you almost see their emotion.
Yeah.
Like you see if they're there, if they're not, if they're game. So, you know, maybe, but for me, it never was, you know, personally. Like, it doesn't matter if you get emotional or not. Like, I knew what I was going to do and I believed in myself 100%. So, like, no matter what they done in the weigh-in, it wasn't going to change my mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe other people, the good example, you know, Connor and Dustin in the first fight, you know, like he had him so fired up, he had him emotional. Did it spill over into the fight? Maybe. I'm not sure, you know, only Dustin could say that. So that's a good example of maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, you know. Like is it the lead up to the weigh-in? Is it the weigh-in itself? Is it just a fight? Who knows? For me, no. Like it didn't matter how emotional or in my grill someone got. Like I believed in myself, and I was just gonna, like, I knew I had the opportunity to stick it on him the next day, you know.
Yeah. That's a good example, the McGregor Poirier. But another actual example that I read about not so long ago was probably around the time because obviously you fought and you beat Conor McGregor when, like, before your UFC days. But it was around that time Conor McGregor fought a guy called Dave Hill. I'm sure you probably know all about him. And I was reading Dave Hill talking about the weigh-in, and he's like, he wasn't even talking about fight night. He's focused specifically on the weigh-in, and he said McGregor was doing what McGregor does. He was giving it all the trash talk for weeks, but Dave Hill was kind of ignoring it. But then he said on weigh-in day, McGregor came and he had all his bravado and he was doing all his trash talk, but he said it was the energy he brought. Dave Hill said he was looking at this man, and this man, there was almost a physical energy with him where he was just like, he believes so much in himself. Dave Hill was thinking, I thought he was just saying all this stuff to sort of build up the fight. But this man believes everything he's saying, and he said it actually completely threw him off. Now, you fought Conor McGregor around that time. McGregor obviously very well known for the mental side of his game. So did he bring that kind of energy to you, or again, are you just such a chilled out fella? You were like not arsed about any of that.
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't on the same level as the Dave. Like I remember the Weighing with Dave. Like I knew Dave because like we fought on the same circuit. Like I
Yeah,
think Dave was fighting when I made my pro debut on the same show.
yeah,
Um, but like it was the same thing when me and Connor weighed in. Like we're in each other's grill. Like there's old photos from Cage Warriors of us like head to head. Um, and being on it, like my coach hadn't even arrived at this stage. I was on my own, and he had the whole team with him. But like I liked that. I liked being on my own. I liked everyone having like a team behind them. But it kind of got me fired up. Like if anything, it was just that stubbornness. Somebody getting your girl, somebody with their crowd, and all I was thinking, I'm on my own here. But like I wouldn't. I'm not going to back down to no one. Like it just brought a fire out of me, if anything else.
yeah, absolutely. So that's the way in. That's the day before. I want to ask you then about actual fight day. Are you one of those fighters that hates fight day? Like I spoke to Michael Conlon, for example, before. He hates fight day. He said he goes for a walk, he plays a bit of Call of Duty on his Xbox, anything to kind of take his mind off the fight. Whereas I know other fighters maybe like to sit around and think about the fights, visualize the shots and the sequences. What kind of side do you fall on? Like, do you hate fight day and do you like to just not think about the fight, or what would your routine be on the day?
I, do you know what? Like generally, you don't. That's the thing. After the weigh, you don't think about the fight until after the weigh-in.
Yeah,
Um, I've been in both positions. I've been where I'm dreading it. Like I said, like earlier in my career, where I've been kind of dreading fight day, but like towards the end of well, not even the end of my career, maybe like three pro fights in, I've been relishing it. Like I really enjoy fight day. Like there's sometimes like I've woke up. I remember my UFC debut, for instance. I remember waking up and being very nervous, and like I don't know. Obviously, like the thoughts of the debut, like you want to go on, put a show and everything. But I remember going to sleep and then waking up and being just as calm and in a perfect place. It's almost like I went to sleep and like my mind figured it all out, and that was it. I woke up, I was so calm, and I was there. But generally, fight day, like I kind of enjoy the whole process. Looking forward to it. Like obviously, you got the weight in aspect, which is kind of the most annoying bit. You just want to be in the change room,
yeah.
and again, once you're in the change room, once you start warming up, it's just your training taking over. You don't even, well, I don't even think like about the negative bits or nothing. It was just a case of doing what I do.
Was that the same? Like I know you kind of spoke about your UFC debut. When you actually get into the changing room for your UFC debut, is it the same? Is it the same kind of process that you went through throughout your whole career? Because obviously the UFC, the lights are just so much brighter. There's millions watching. But we like you said, even though it's a massive, massive stage, you just fall back into that routine that you've went through a million times.
My UFC debut was probably one of the most calm I've been, because I remember Faraz was in the change room, and it was maybe like I had my hands wrapped and we're just sitting around like joking, laughing. And it's like an hour before, and then like I used to have these big warm ups, hour before when he even started warming up, Fraz is just chilled, and I was like, Jesus, like I couldn't believe how calm he was, and it was having the same effect on me. It was almost like it wasn't a big deal, it was just another fight, and
Yeah.
it had a great effect on me. If anything, like I was more nervous. This sounds stupid, but I was more nervous doing my warm up because I had Ben Askren. There was Pettis was there, Andy Pettis, who was the champion at the time. Sergio Pettis. Um, there's a few other guys as well, like obviously Duke Rufus. All the guys there. I was more nervous about warming up in front of them and them thinking, Jesus, look at this amateur. Like it sounds crazy, but like and even my cornerman, he told me, because like he didn't know me very well at the time. Like he was watching me do shadow, and shadow was a big part of my game. And he was like, I was watching your shadow, and I was like, Jesus, this guy's in for a hard night, like, and like then I just went out and just blitzed him, But yeah, like it was a strange one. Like, it was very calm. But then I've been on the opposite. Not tense, but too calm. Like, I remember the Poirier fight. It was almost like I was lethargic.
Yeah.
Like, I was in the change room, and I was like, I could have just gone to sleep, and I didn't have no real no fire, no nerves, no fire. And it was a strange one. Like, you're trying to get yourself up for it because, like, you relish them nerves. Like, it gives you.
It's
And
a
I
shot.
almost, yeah, I almost felt like I was too relaxed about it
Mm.
all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously sometimes you haven't got control over that. Sometimes it's just how you feel. So
Yeah.
there's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. You can be too nervous, but you can be like too calm.
Yeah. In the change room for Poirier, did your coach say anything to you at that stage? Like, was he noticing this, and was he trying to put a bit of a firework up your arse?
Not really, not really. I think, yeah, it was just because he was so used to me being quite calm there. I don't think it was as much as an issue. But sometimes, like, you can be, you got that, like, that nastiness, that
Yeah.
fire. Whereas this time I was just a bit too calm. Like, I was almost like in my head, too confident in my striking that I was just like, I got three opportunities, whether there's a takedown or not. The start of every round, at some point I'm going to knock him out. And that's how I had in my head. It was just like, I'll catch him. Like, I just had like an absolute no doubt belief, but it was almost like to the point where almost like too confident in a little bit, like so like maybe not enough fear.
Yeah. No, I get you. Yeah. You mentioned Firas there. So this is Firas Zahabi. This is one of the greatest MMA coaches in the world. One thing that I'm really interested in about your career is you seem to be a man who has really put himself in uncomfortable situations, like in terms of training camps outside of fight night. So, for example, you went and trained with Firas. Firas trains George St. Pierre, like I mentioned before, probably the greatest to ever do it. Just absolute killers in his stable. So you put yourself in that situation. Even with the boxing, you had 7 professional boxing fights and you won all 7. But I think I was reading you sparred with, I think, George Groves, James DeGale, Eubank Jr., Andy Lee. These are all world champions. So the fact, like, is that something, if you want to make it to the top in fighting, do you have to, like, outside of fight night in your training camp, do you have to put yourself under so much physical and mental stress? Do you have to really, really find, like, your uncomfortable zone almost?
I think you definitely got to keep yourself out of the comfort zone for sure. I think, like, once you go too much into your comfort zone, then you're not pushing the boundaries. Like, I was lucky in the boxing. Like, my coach, John Tandy, he was in contact. Like, he knew what I lacked in experience in boxing. You can make up with, like, in the hard sparring. Like
Yeah.
like you said, sparring these guys, the stress it put me under, it would get me acclimatized very fast. And it did, it did. Like, I was sparring, like, I remember sparring DeGale 10 rounds, 3.5 minute rounds with 30-second break. Like, I done, like, I was sparring these guys week in, week out.
Yeah.
And I even remember, again, here's another thing from a mental aspect. I remember the exact sparring where I got comfortable because I wasn't relaxed yet. I wasn't comfortable. And I remember sparring Groves and we were doing 6 rounds. Um, and I remember just like, I'm just gonna stick it on him. Like, and I remember, like, us having a good tear, and I remember just from that day on, like, I kind of figured, I don't even know what it was that changed it, but I figured something, and ever since then I was very comfortable. It didn't matter who I sparred.
Yeah. What was it like initially going into Firas Zahabi's camp and going in sparring with these boys in the boxing? Like, was it like very daunting?
Again, no, really, like because I've experienced far worse. In the boxing, like, these guys hit like trucks. So not really. Like, what, I was never daunted by anyone. It didn't matter what weight they were.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember, like, I remember the first couple of spars. Like, I'm sparring guys that are 35ers and they're sticking it on me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where I was like, I need to be here, because the guys, if a 35er can stick it on me like that, then like, I need to be here sparring this level guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So one interesting part of combat sports, so I'm always interested in, is and you've spoken a bit about it yourself, is that kind of fighter coach relationship, because it must be the most close, intimate coach athlete relationship in all of sports. Some people have like 12, 15-year careers, just the two of them, and they're working together. Now, I remember Steve Collins, obviously a great Irish boxer. He changed camps a few times, trained with a few different fighters, and he actually says, or trained, sorry, with a few different coaches. And he said that it's something he would encourage fighters to do, because you're just drawn on different experience from different top level coaches. Like sometimes I feel like in fighting, there's a bit too much made of loyalty and sticking with a coach. If he's not for you, I don't personally think there's nothing wrong with going and experiencing different camps elsewhere. Like, if you were to talk to a younger fighter, would you, because I know you have had a couple of different coaches, would you encourage them to go and sample different coaches just to build up your skill set?
Yeah, it's an interesting look at the sport. Again, like, I think it's down to the individual. And I think what people don't realize is that the fighter itself is he's got to kind of find his own path.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, if I'm struggling in my grappling, and like where I'm training at the minute doesn't give me what I need, then I need to go somewhere else. It doesn't necessarily mean move camp, like, if you got so looking back, like, ideally for me, like I would have loved to stay with my initial coach, because he knew me better than anyone. He could calm me down, he could fire me up. It didn't matter, what. But like, ideally, what it would be, I would have traveled to these other camps with him, and we would have picked up knowledge, brought it back, and just kept improving, because we're limited. Like the information wasn't there at the time for us. So like, we needed to travel, and that would have been ideal for me, because you got somebody who will keep you calm, knows you inside out, but obviously is moving like, so like, they know where you're lacking too. You both, like, you and your coach know where you're lacking, so then you go work on that somewhere else and then bring the information back. So again, working with other coaches, like when I moved over to boxing, like I was working with John, I learned so much. I feel like if your coach is still a student of the game, then it's less of an issue. If your coach is no longer a student of the game, then it becomes an issue. They're no longer looking to progress when the fighter needs to keep progressing. So you can do it together. If your coach is too close-minded, then you got an issue. Like, you're not going to keep progressing.
That's interesting. Looking at it, yeah. Would you like to coach yourself? Because again, you seem very chilled out kind of fella. I can imagine you being good and calm in a corner, and you're probably a student of the game, I'm sure, as well. So are you getting into the coaching side of things, or if not, if you haven't done it yet, would you be interested?
Like, for years I coached, like when I was in Wales, like I said, like we'd be at all the classes teaching. Like I would coach most of the kids.
At a higher level, though, would you like to go in at a higher level?
I've been there too. Even now, like I'll go into the sessions with the boys, like and I'll just, like, well, for the guys who want coaching, like, there's so many guys to cover when they're sparring, so I'll go and I'll coach guys. I really do enjoy coaching in that sense, but the problem is it's not really a full-time career in that sense. If you're going to be a coach, you either need to be teaching classes or you need to be teaching privates, and that's where I don't enjoy it so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Like teaching privates to somebody, like, if it's a fighter, I enjoy it, but like just your general everyday public, less so. I find it's more draining.
Yeah, no, I get you. Probably because you're around high level fighters your whole life, I suppose it's probably hard to drop back down to just your regular public after dealing with that level of skill and mentality.
I suppose it depends. Again, it's the individual. Like, for me, I'm very I love the technical aspect of it. So if you go somebody who just wants to come in and get fit, it's great for them, but for me, it's less interesting.
Yeah.
I want somebody who wants to learn the little nitty gritty, and that's where I get my buzz from.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah. So in July 2020, anyway, you hung up the gloves, so you retired. I just want to know how have you found that experience? Because you're fighting. You've said yourself you started competing, like training when you were 5. So your whole life you've been a fighter, and then all of a sudden you go from being a fighter your whole life to being the former fighter. How has that been for you? Has it been a tough time, or have you relished it?
Um, there's moments, there's moments it's tough, and there's moments that, like, to be honest, overall, I feel like I'm happy. I'm very happy in the decision I made, because, like, with injuries, everything else, what I feel I need to do to get back to myself, I'm not at the stage in my life where I want to do it. I'm not gonna go back to England to train with my boxing coach and leave my family. Like, I just find, for me, like, I'm not at that stage. I haven't got the desire the same way I used to have. For me, this used to be my everything. Fighting was all I cared about, all I wanted, being a world champion. Whereas now, it's not what I care about anymore. It's no longer a priority, and that was kind of the decision behind it. Like, when I wasn't comfortable in there anymore, and my desire to be world champion isn't there. Like, it's good money, but it also hurts me too much, to go in and put on a poor performance.
Yeah.
Like, how I feel after, like, like uh I'm angry at myself, like, I can't even watch the fight because it hurts me too much to see me go out and fight poorly. So that was kind of like my decision behind it. Whereas before, like, for instance, when I lost a Poirier fight, like, again, it lit a fire. Like, I remember, I think I said it before in a previous interview. I said, like, somebody asked me how did the fight go in the elevator, and I had to tell them I lost, and like, I wasn't used to losing. This, like, just to say them words, like, it ate me up so much. So I was back in the gym like 2 weeks later after I got my stitches out, and I was doing 3 sessions a day. I just threw myself in, and I didn't do nothing other than that until my next fight. Whereas I didn't have this, when I was losing, I wasn't kind of like, I wasn't raring to get back in the gym. If anything, I just wanted to get away from it. Like, it was annoying me.
Yeah. Fighters are obviously very famous for not, sticking to their retirements. Do you worry that will happen to you and that you'll get an itch that you need to scratch again, or are you pretty content that this is it?
Less so. I think, like, with my rib's a big factor. I can't train properly. Once I get hitting it, I'm kind of done. Even just weight and pressure on it. So, like I said, like, what I need to do to get comfortable back in the octagon and get back to my former self, I feel like I couldn't even do it. I can't go do the hard sparring, because once I get one good dig in it, I'm out for months again. Then there's times it's still in my head. I think, like I'll see my friends fight, and I think, like, I would love to be back in there, and, like, even just from a pride perspective, like, you're proud to tell people what your job is. Like, I'm a professional fighter. This is all I ever wanted to be, and it's a job you're proud of. But again, that's the wrong reasons. I never wanted to be famous, so that's less of an issue. Staying in some sort of limelight, that doesn't bother me much. Just the pride sometimes, and also, like, the money. Again, not the right reason, but being able to make 50K on one night's fight, it's a lot of money. Like, if anything, is hard to turn down in a sense. But I think the kind of how much it eats me up when I put on a poor performance outweighs, like, that nice bit of cash I could make.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns, Joe, in terms of the physical side of it down the road? I know you had to be pulled out of the Poirier fight back in 2015. I think it was before. It obviously happened a couple of years later, but you got concussed a week before. So, and obviously you'd be taking blows throughout your career. Like, is that, For an MMA fighter, is that a big concern just moving forward into the rest of your life, that you could have some issues?
It's, you know what, that's the possibility. You know, when you get in the game, like in boxing, I've had a lot of tough spars. Obviously, the training takes its toll on you, so it's definitely a possibility. It's always something you think about. When I made my decision to retire too, was like when I'm in the fight, I was reacting so slow,
Mm.
which is something actually I was interested on your opinion on, because it's not something I've ever experienced. But like the last few fights, I wasn't comfortable in there, and it was like a bad dream, like people are throwing leg kicks that I'm seeing from a mile away, but it's like I can't pull my leg out of the way in time. It's like a bad dream.
You hear that with so many fighters, don't you? Coming near the end, that it basically the mind is seeing it, but the body's just not doing it. Like, so, it could just be that the body's just had you've kind of come out the far side of your prime. You hear so many boxers talking about that. They see the shot they want to throw, the body just won't do it. You mentioned the same there. You see the leg kick coming, you just can't check it. I think that in itself, the fact that you said that, probably confirms that. I'm sure the decision you made probably was the correct one.
That was it, because I thought like I'm okay at this stage, but if I had a killer in front of me throwing head kicks and I'm reacting just as slow, it's like I got a little girl now, I don't want her to grow up with me slurring and all this. I seen it enough in the boxing, I seen a lot of the trainers who slur, and I don't want that. So it was definitely a part of the decision too. So it's something I think, once you don't want to be world champion, like, well, this is personal for me actually. Like, obviously everybody got their own reason for fighting, but for me, once I felt like I wasn't going to be world champion, or I didn't have the desire to be world champion, then it was time to get out of the game when I'm still healthy.
Yeah, no, I think just hearing you talk, I think it was probably the right call to make. What are you doing these days then? Like, because you're saying you're maybe not going to go down the coaching road as much. Like, what are you getting involved in your father's construction business, or what's the story?
Well, I'm over here in Canada, so I'm waiting on my work visa to come through actually. But so in the meantime, I've just been like going to the gym when I can. Obviously, like lockdown and all this crack is kind of
Yeah, yeah,
is making the balls of everything. Like I've been training with some of the boys. We've been doing like small groups, like I said, like just jumping in with Sanchez and Spicely, just helping them boys in their camp, in any way I can. And then I'm training in the house. I got a nice setup in the garage. I can do my weights and that, and like whenever any of the boys need me, then I'll just go and give them a hand. Whether like Eamon's got a fight coming up for his brother, and he'll send me footage. Like Spice and Sanchez will send me footage of their sparring, so I'll just give them my feedback and try and keep in the game. I suppose it's just a case of passing time until I can get this work visa on the go.
I think everyone's in the same boat as you at the moment, just sitting around and training in their garage. Yeah, look, there's two questions anyway that I ask everyone at the end. So the first one is, what athlete do you admire most from a mental point of view? It can be any athlete from any sport, from any time period.
Geez, that's a good question. Um, there's so many athletes like I really admired growing up. Like Steve Collins, like you said, was one of them. He wasn't the prettiest boxer by no means, but for
Stuck
me,
in,
like
didn't you?
he just got stuck in, and his will to win and his cardio and everything was very impressive. I think probably the athlete I admired the most was GSP.
Yeah, yeah.
GSP. I just feel like you said, like he was a a great martial artist, like a student of the game, very technical. Like for me, I love the technical fighters. So watching George, even with his nerves, how he adapted to every fight, his game plan into every fight, it was next to none. Even in his preparation, I feel like he put himself in the most uncomfortable positions. Even like when you like being here, seeing it from another aspect, watching his camps, like he brings in the top guys to put himself in the most uncomfortable
Mm.
situations in every area, so he has the confidence on fight night. And and again, meeting him as a person, and being one of his training partners, like just to top it off, he's actually just as amazing a person as you would expect. You know, like when I got my concussions, George was booking appointments with like who's it with, no, a chiropractor, but forget the name now, but like, so they released the kind of the bones in your cranial bones, you know, like he booked that for me, even paid for it, just because he wanted me to be okay and come back and do a run, you know, like that just kind of shows the kind of person, you know, he barely knew me, but that's how he is, you know.
Yeah,
He's
you
such
hear
a
so
good
many
person.
stories about George. Like, again, like I touched on this earlier about this kind of idea people have of fighters that are these big brutes. He just comes across in interviews, and anyone speaking about him, just like you're speaking about now, he just seems to be the biggest gentleman that's ever lived, but also the most dangerous man that's probably ever lived. It's just such a kind of a strange contradiction.
Exactly that. And again, here's another one from a different aspect. Like Bisping, you know, I grew up watching Bisping,
Yeah, yeah.
and I met Bisping a few times, and I love him, you know, like he's like, some people, he'll drive them crazy, you know, but I find like he loves it, you know. He's like my brother. He'll wind you. He knows exactly where to poke you to
Yeah.
wind you up, but just no matter how many setbacks he had, he just kept coming. Like how his health, like now, like he's had surgery after surgery, lost his eye, everything else. It didn't matter what it was. He didn't like losing to all these people who was getting popped on steroids.
Yeah, yeah.
Came back just when he's on the brink, you know, on the brink of a title fight. He just kept coming back, and then he won the title. You know, how can you not admire a man like
Oh,
that? You know, I find
unbelievable.
I find like he just never lost faith, and he achieved what he wanted to achieve, and I find that, you know, very, you know, pretty amazing. You know, I
Oh,
find people like that.
that man's resilience is absolutely unbelievable. Sure, didn't he win when he won the actual middleweight title? He got like 10 days notice or something, didn't he? Had to lose like 15 kilos and was blind in one eye. Ridiculous,
That's
like.
it. And he's fighting a guy who beat him before. You know,
Yeah.
all the mental aspects of it,
Oh,
but he just, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. All them, he still had that belief, and you know, I found that pretty amazing. You know.
no, unbelievable stuff. Yeah. So the last question then is, if you were to go back to the start of your career and give that younger version of yourself one piece of advice, again from a mental standpoint, this could be difficult to answer for you because you actually did achieve massive things. You probably got to the heights that you had hoped to get to. You got to the UFC. But if you could give that young version of yourself starting off, turning pro, one piece of advice from a mentality point of view, what would you say to him?
It's a good question. I think going back, it would be a case of you haven't always got to train at the top gym. You know, like I remember getting swayed by that. Like you learn so much, like how my games come on from training with Faraz and all the coaches here in TriStar is unbelievable. But also what you can do, you could come here for a camp. Like again, like if I was to do it again, I would love to have my initial coach and we travel together, you know. So because from my perspective, when I left the gym, it was also all the people there was my motivation. You know, being there with these people, they were the people who I kind of grew up with, who wanted to see me do well.
Yeah.
And when I came here, the training was, you know, another level, but I wasn't surrounded by the people that kind of like my reason for fighting. You know, like I wanted to make them proud. I wanted to be a world champion for them. Um, and kind of you lose track of that.
Did they stay with you though? Maybe not physically, but like, did you stay in touch with these people, or did you were they maybe annoyed that you went elsewhere?
No, I stayed in touch with them all. You know, even
Yeah,
like when I go back to Wales, like I meet up with all the guys from Falcons. You know, we all go for food. Um, all my friends from back in Ireland. You know, like all my friends from school in Wales. Like I keep in touch with them all, but it's different. You know, being out here, you kind of lose track of what it means to them also.
yeah, I get you.
When you're there and you're living it every day, like, and they're kind of like you're coaching them, you know, and you got the kids that kind of look up to you and aspire to kind of do what you're doing, it's amazing how it drives you on. And when you come away from it all, even being around my parents, like my mother, like she was trained in child psychology, you know, she was working with kids. And I feel like she's just got a natural knack for it, you know, just being around my family when you'd have them doubts, when you'd have them hard times. Like my mother was great at that, you know. She trained with me, you know, from when I was a kid also. So
Really?
she knew me back to front, you know. So even just having them around, like to talk you around when you're starting to go off the tracks.
Yeah.
You know, you really got to have a good understanding of what drives you in the game, and I kind of moved away from my motivation without even realizing, you know.
Okay. I get you. Look, it's been brilliant listening to your story. Like I said at the start, I haven't had an MMA fighter on before. I was really desperate to get it on, and yeah, you didn't disappoint. It's brilliant to hear all your stories. So thanks a million, Joe, for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you. You know, it's an aspect that I really enjoy. You know, so I was interested to get your feedback on it all too. You know.
Good stuff. Thanks, Joe. Big thanks to Joe Duffy for coming onto the podcast this week. Like I said to Joe there, I've really wanted a mixed martial artist on the podcast for quite a while now, because I think anybody that's ever seen an MMA fight, you know, they can't help but be impressed by just the mental strength of these people that get into a cage and fight. I mean, I couldn't even relate to it. I mean, I would never have the battle to do that, but I've always been fascinated by anyone that does, because, you know, the stress that they must be going through, the anxiety, just the physical danger involved in the game, and to be able to kind of manage all the emotions and perform under those bright lights, especially at the level of the UFC, it's just absolutely incredible. So brilliant to hear Joe talk all about the mental side of the game. So thanks a million, Joe, for coming onto the podcast, and thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next week with a new athlete. Cheers.